John, good morning. Over here. There you go. Hi there. John, how, with the temperature, the weather the last day and a half, how has it changed the golf course, and is it close or at where you would kind of desire it to be for the start?
Well, it's there's been a lot of talk about the weather. I don't need to belabor that, but we're very hopeful. We understand that the golf course, from everybody here, that the golf course can turn around very quickly. We'll see this afternoon. I can't answer that because I don't know. We've seen some of it come to us with a little bit of firmness and a little bit of green speed. Candidly, we'd like to see more. And as we like to say, Mother Nature has a seat at the table, and we can only make water evaporate only so quickly. But we're hoping for a good afternoon of a little bit of breeze, a little bit more drying.
Question on the right.
For Mike, curious if you could give us an update on the media rights negotiations, and also speak to the possibility or the appetite of splitting up that package.
Yeah, it wouldn't be strange of me to do this, but I'll be smart enough not to negotiate my media rights in a media center. Yeah, so for those who don't know, our media rights starting in 27 have become available, so we're in the marketplace right now. Early in the process, I guess all I'd say is the level of interest, including our current partners, which are phenomenal, has been great. I mean, not just we're not to the point yet where we're close. I mean, we're months away, not weeks away from kind of figuring out what the future is, but I would say that the breadth of interest, which is really a great statement for the game, not just a great statement for USGA championships, but the breadth of statements and the amount of people that have come to the table is really the exciting part.
On the left, Brentley.
This question for John. A little bit more about the rough. Is this unprecedented rough in terms of thickness and depth? And then also, are there any extra lengths that are being done in terms of spotters and things like that to ensure that golf balls aren't lost and get found?
The rough will be a little over 5 inches, and it is dense. Oakmont, just day in and day out, has dense rough. But we have plenty of spotters, but no guarantees we won't lose a golf ball or two, but we're going to do everything we humanly possibly can, not to do so, but we feel good about that. But, as I said, I think the rough, if players that drive the ball in the fairway will have an advantage, no question about it. But, I think thinking about the rough, I'll be honest, we gave that a lot of thought, and looking back and doing research at Oakmont, it's interesting. You go back and most every U.S. Open here, all 9 of them had at least one day or at least a day or so in advance of it that we got some rain. So when we thought about that, and we thought about the restoration, and the restoration made the fairways, 2 to 4 yards longer, some more, some a little bit less. We just felt we needed the rough that we have. And we think it's appropriate for the driving corridors, and we're looking forward to seeing how it unfolds.
Question on the far right.
This one's for Mike. Speaking to the rules and the way that talking about distance so much and the way drivers are tested, has there been any discussion about more transparency of just anytime something happens, it gets published, similar to how F1, there's a rules violation, it goes out into the press. That way you don't have players talking about leaks and leaks to the media and things like that. Has there been discussion with the PGA Tour as well as the other bodies?
Well, just to rephrase a couple of things. So for the rest of the world, we test what we call CT creep, characteristic time creep, which is, I assume, what you're talking about, right? So, and that's essentially how long the ball stays on the face. Think about a kid jumping out a trampoline, and the longer they're on the trampoline, the farther they bounce off. So we set a limit with manufacturers in terms of how long that ball can stay on, and it's tested in terms of microseconds. So, there's a test, there's a tolerance, but at the end of the day, if it's on there for more than 258 microseconds, we consider that club out of tolerance. And so, as a service to the players, to the tours, and we do it here as well, we do random testing pretty regularly. So, I think sometimes when we say random testing, people think it, but if you're playing on tour, you're going to get tested a couple of 3 times a year. And we think the testing that we're doing is commensurate with both the degree of failure that we see, which is pretty minimal. And quite frankly, when we see failure, at least currently, we're seeing clubs just literally creep over the line. And it's a line we draw. We aren't seeing, when we're taking drivers off, drivers that are, oh my gosh, look where that one went. So I think sometimes in the media and the fan space, you think, I just took 20 yards off that player. I mean, we're literally talking about an extra microsecond. And if you get within, I think it's 18 microseconds of the line, and we test you, we give you what we call a yellow warning, which is, hey, be careful, that club is starting to, because at the velocities and at the frequency in which they hit these clubs, they will just, relax over time. So as a service to manufacturers, to the players, and to the tours, we provide that. If I'm being honest with you, I think in terms of kind of what happened at the PGA Championship, it made us more committed to, not wanting to have this be the topic of town, because I think when you talk about a rules violation or somebody who's playing with a hot driver, that gets so much more sensational than the reality. And I can tell you, as a rules body, if we had concerned about this incredible advantage, we would change the degree in which we test. But we think the testing that we're doing now is commensurate with the size of both the issue and the size of the reality of the issue. So it's probably shouldn't admit this, but I'm not even in the, I know we tested this week. I couldn't tell you if we had failures, and if so, what those failures were in the time. I could probably go ask, but I stay out of that mix. I know that if we saw a trend that was alarming in terms of either how many or how far they were moving beyond, we would change the way we approach it. But with what we're seeing today, it'd be a greater interruption. The juice wouldn't be worth the squeeze.
On the back on the left, James.
Mike, just to ask a follow-up about the media rights. I'm wondering, what are the USGA's priorities as far as the next media rights deal as it sort of surveys the landscape?
Yeah, I mean, we love our current partnership, so let's start there. For a lot of reasons, but one is we're talking about truly committed people that want to not just cover the event, but want to tell the stories. Longest days, how they handle the U.S. Women's Open, how we handle the amateur, and obviously this week. I mean, I said this one time a couple of years ago, but imagine a football game. When we were out in LA, we came on air at 11 o'clock in New York and went off air at 11 o'clock p.m. Imagine a football game being on for 12 hours. I mean, the same thing's going to happen here on Thursday, and then again Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we really appreciate how they let these stories play out and let people be a part of it. Obviously, we're committed to pretty significant investments back in the game, and one of the benefits of that investment is a good TV partner. But we're going to look for somebody that can deliver, this at the levels or better than we're delivering now. And through that partnership enables us not just to tell the U.S. Open story or the U.S. Women's Open story, but some of these incredible amateur stories as well. And we think that's been part of our partnerships for a long time, that we get to put a limelight on some championships that maybe otherwise people wouldn't get to see. So, like I said, I don't really want to share communication strategy in a group of people that have the job to go then tell everybody else. I wouldn't be the first time I've made that mistake, but we got a ways to go. And so when we get to a point where we think we can really share with you outcomes, whether that's current partner or different partner, I promise we'll sit down and do that, including the strategies that drove us there.
A few more questions on the left. Julia, back row first. Right here.
Thank you. Mike, you mentioned right-sizing attendance here. Can you speak specifically how attendance might look different than it was? Championship tickets are sold out, so how the capacity might look different than it was in 2016 or previous Opens, and what went into that decision? Well,
to JP's point, with the anchor site agreement, with us working together with the clubs, we've created a lot of fan space here that may not have been here always before, and that's great. Not just in terms of corporate opportunities, but fan space as well. I would tell you that this weekend, when we're all in here, I mean, as Fred knows, there's a ticker in our office that every time somebody comes through, we see the number change, and we got to move it because it just keeps going all day, and you got looking at it. But I'll bet all in we'll have about 40,000 people on site here on Saturday, 40,000 people on Sunday, and probably similar tomorrow and Friday.
Right in front, Ann.
Hey, Mike. What's the latest on rolling back the ball issue, particularly with the resistance from the PGA and the PGA Tour?
Yeah, so we've had good meetings. I would say stakeholder meetings at Augusta. Started at the Players, then met again at the Augusta. Had a meeting again yesterday with the majority of the stakeholders of the game. And it's been, I have to say, I'm encouraged by the collaborative, nature of the discussions. And listen, I get this isn't easy, and everybody's got their own constituents. I'll just say what I said yesterday again is, as an industry, we have to be able to make small adjustments that are in the best interest of the game long term, that we all know would be better 40 years from now if we were smart enough to make them today. We'll make those. Not everybody will like it. It'll be high anxiety until we get there, but nobody's going to die. The game's going to be great. And we're going to prove that we can be better for future generations rather than to simply look the other way and know that, in 40 or 50 years, we'd be handing them something we could have made small adjustments on. So, yeah, if I'm being honest with you, we're full speed ahead on what we've announced. Those decisions have been made. I'm really excited that the different stakeholders are in the room talking about the how-to and what further things we need to know to do that better. But I won't lie to you, and there's anxiety there, and I'm right there on the anxiety list too. But this is why we're put in this position. We don't have the same conflicts and contracts and biases. So this is our job as governance, and it's not a fun one. And if you look over the 130-year history, we're not new to this, and we've had to do these things before that feel like, oh my gosh, when they happen, and you look back 10 years later and go, whatever happened to the? But I think as an industry, we got to be able to do this, both for ourselves and for the future generations that want to inherit this game, and we will.
Is there a plan B?
We've announced our plan. Yeah.
Front right.
Hey, Mike, right here. I don't think the purse for this week has been announced, but just in general, with purses at tournaments, at the biggest tournaments around the world, continuing to go up very quickly, what are the challenges, if any, for keeping the U.S. Open prize money at elite status?
That was a good prompt, because I walked in here, Beth said to me, hey, can you do me a favor and just mention the purse? And I totally failed on that, so sorry. Our purse is $21.5 million. Winner's check is 4.3. We didn't raise our purse this year. We've been, when I started at the USGA just 4 years ago, our purse was 12.5. So I feel comfortable that we've been a leader in moving fast and bigger. We're not really a fan of small, but when we go a little bit bigger. Same, by the way, has happened on the women's side, where we've gone from 5.5 to 12 in a similar period of time. Yes, listen, does that make it hard when you talk about, to Fred's point, all the investments we make in the game? And but at the same time, we understand. We want to be relevant. We understand the competitive set. We know that this probably isn't really about the money for the person who puts it there, but at the same time, we want the money to be commensurate with the achievement. And so yeah, we feel comfortable. I don't really know the other four majors, but I think if we're not the top, we're close to the top, and we'll continue to evaluate that both on the men's and women's side, because it's part of creating what we want to be the greatest championship in the game.
On the left, Doug.
For Mike or John, I'm not sure which, but there's been some talk this week. This might be Mickelson's last U.S. Open. As a non-champion, would he be considered for another exemption? And would Shinnecock and the hockey he played that day be held against him?
I'm happy to take it. Well, listen, the answer to that is Phil did receive one in 2021, and I'm a little sleep deprived, Doug. So. But counting my years backwards. But it's like anything. We would review things for Shinnecock ahead of next year, and look at all of those possibilities, and evaluate it from there. I think the way that we would also think of Phil is we hope he earns his way in, and I think he'd tell you the same thing. And that's what he did last time. We gave him one, and then he went out and won the PGA Championship, so wouldn't put it past him.
Question on the back right aisle, Alex.
Yeah, Mike, just want to make sure I understand the position of the USGA on the rollback. 2 weeks ago, Jack Nicklaus said that right now he'd be willing to just freeze it as is, where he's been a major proponent of rolling the ball back, understanding what's going on with the different groups involved with it. Are you saying that if, in fact, you can't get the tours to support you or the manufacturers to support you, you will still implement starting on your date and would be whatever U.S. Open that would be?
I would say to you, Alex, I was at Jack's event on that Wednesday. Didn't have that conversation with him, but I will now that I heard your comment. Because when I first told Jack about it, his comment was, well, that's a nice start, Mike, but you and I both know that's not enough. I mean, and he's been pretty consistent with that from the beginning. What I would say to Jack and what I would say to you is, I've said this to a lot of people on a lot of ranges, I don't I don't have a problem with the position that let's keep it where it is today. If you want to keep the distance where it is today, this action that we're talking about is essentially that. We'll be in 15 or 20 years, and maybe less based on strength and swing training and everything else. We'll be right back at the distance we are today, 12 to 17 years after this change. So the only other way to say keep it the same is I don't want balls flying out of the sky at a certain number. I mean, people say keep it the same, and then you say, how do you want me to do that? One of the ways we'll do that is to make small adjustments so that distance over the long term, 40 and 50 years, is similar. We know that distance will continue to increase. We know that people will chase it, and quite frankly, it's a game advantage that you should chase if you can accomplish it. But what we have to do is stop the pace, the slope of that curve that it's been on in the last 20 to 40 years for the next 20, 40. And that's what this does. Anybody who thinks this is more than that, including Jack, who's smart enough because we've had numerous conversations about this, he knows that this change is moderate and it won't have a significant impact, but maybe in 10 or 15 years, we'll feel like the growth of that curve is pretty slow as opposed to the pace in which we're dealing with today.
We have a few more questions. First, Bob.
Mike, I realize that you're only one part of this whole process, but after the Masters, there was some chatter that the LIV Golf leadership was going to readdress their OWGR thoughts and maybe look at that again, perhaps resubmit. Can you update us on where that is? Has there been anything formal from them, or have you had any discussions with them about trying to maybe comply?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be honest with you, my last 2 weeks have been sort of in a cave. So if they have submitted something new in the last 2 weeks, it would be in the last 2 weeks. As a board member, I'm not aware of a resubmit. I know there's been dialogue with LIV about the concept of resubmitting. I mean, as a board member, I mean, I'll review it as just like we did the last time. But I don't think that's happened. And if you know something more than that, that's just because I'm a few weeks behind on my emails right now. But I'm pretty sure that at this point there hasn't been. But I know there's been active dialogue. That dialogue, at least at this point, I don't believe has turned into a submission.
Jeff?
One question for Mike and one for John. Mike, you mentioned anxiety about, I guess, the implementation of the new regulations. Can you just expand on what you're anxious about?
Yeah.
And John, can you give us a sense? We know there's netting out on the golf course for tees that you're likely to use, but just kind of an outline of what you tell players to anticipate in terms of specific setup elements this week to look for and expect.
Sure.
Go ahead. Do it.
I would say the netting you see, Jeff, is really to save certain areas. You know, at Oakmont, there's a lot of runoff, closely mown areas where excuse me, we'd like to, during practice rounds, save some of those. That's really what most of it is. But we do save teeing areas, and so the players know kind of exactly what we're thinking. You know, as you know, we like to move things around. We like to show different angles. We like to show different yardages. We work very hard on the par threes especially, and each of them will play a different yardage, and we'd like to see the players play different clubs into each of them every day. And different angles, and we look at the weather very closely. That's just one example. But we don't always show them everything because we think they've got a yardage book and they've got a lot of tools and they've got great caddies that do the homework. And so if it's a exercise in math, well, something might just show up that we didn't put a net over or they might not be thinking about. That's what I meant by, 15 clubs in the bag dirty, the 14 that they hit and the one between their ears. I think for us, we take great pride in really thinking about what the players think and how we can tempt them to do things that they might otherwise not contemplate doing or normally do and shouldn't at a U.S. Open. That's how we think about it, and that's one of those. We'll give them, if it's going to be a dramatic change to how the golf course would play on a par 4 that we might make drivable and it would be a totally different look, then we'll show them. And frankly, we give the players all of, we're pretty transparent. We show them what our plans are for green speeds, rough height, everything, all of our cutting document. We think that's the right thing to do, and the same thing on the tees.
I mean, it's funny you asked me a question about my anxiety, Jeff. You know better than that. I mean, it starts with 27 Diet Pepsis, but the reality of it is governance is hard, and I knew it when I got here, but it is hard. And, these other stakeholders are my friends, and they're passionate about the future of the game just like us, and I get that. I mean, What's the anxiety comes from is every time I open my computer and read 100 emails, 50 people say, I can't believe you're changing the ball, and 50 people say, is that all you're doing on the ball? And nobody says, I think it's exactly right. And that's the hard part about governance. You're trying to find the right. I mean, even to Alex's point, I sat in Jack's table last Wednesday with other, governance, with other stakeholders of the game, and listened to a lot of really talented leaders of our game say to me, that's not enough, and with people sitting next to me that have said that's too much. And so I think they probably got to see the world of governance. So, yeah, I mean, if you don't think that's hard, a little anxious, you just got to come hang with us for a couple of days. We know that's hard, but the worst thing would be to bail and do nothing just because it's hard.
We have one last question. Matt?
Yeah, to Mike and to John. John, first to Mike. The dates that are set, they're in stone now. It's 2028 and 2030. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I mean, we've got, we've given manufacturers dates that we know they're working. I mean, they're submitting prototypes and have R&D efforts. I mean, I guess when you say set in stone, I mean, could we come across something that would make us feel like our decision needs to be altered? Could. I mean, we're definitely going to stay open-minded to that, but we've yet to see anything that would suggest that. And but I mean, we're not open to new data, if something that would provide. But we did, it was 8 years to that decision point. So I love it when people say, why the rush? I'm like, why the rush? I mean, how many more years do you think we should have taken?
John, to you, when you said about players being alerted, past opens here have had the second hole, the 17th hole, the 8th hole, the 12th hole. They've had various tee positions. Would they be some of the ones that you've already communicated to the players?
I think it's all weather dependent. We'll look at what the weather's going to do, and we'll make those decisions literally either the night before or the morning of. But I will share with you that we will move things around. You'll see some different looks from different tees. But I think you will see more of the golf course at Oakmont than maybe you did in 2016, even with the added length, predominantly because, as I said, the players are 12 yards longer. We have a little less to work with. And so the shot values that we want to present, I think we'll be using more of the golf course, the full length of it, than maybe would have been the case in 16.
And one last thing to you, John. What role does players' opinions and thoughts as the championship is happening impact how you set things up?
Well, I think we don't really go to the players. We let them come to us during the week. They're conducting business, but we do seek out. There are certain players who we know really have an eye for architecture, maybe have played here in the past, and we really respect their opinions. We'll seek those out, and we have done so, and we listen. It's ultimately our decision, but we think we're better by listening. And of course, when players come to us, we'll listen to everything. I think some of you know Scott Langley. He's our Senior Director of Player Relations. He's deeply involved, and he has a team of 5. So we're constantly in communication with the players. And the golf course we pay special attention to. So, yeah, it informs what we do, but we make the decisions.